Hello, AP Environmental Science students. In today's screencast, we're going to finish up with Chapter 6, the human population and its impact. All of today's notes are based on Living in the Environment, the 16th edition by Miller and Spoolman. So Chapter 6.4 looks at how we can slow human population growth. Experience indicates that the most effective ways to slow human population growth are to encourage family planning, reduce poverty, and to elevate the status of women. So the first thing we're going to look at in this chapter is the demographic transition model. If you're coming from AP Human Geography, you've seen this before. This is nothing new. But it tells us that as countries become more industrialized, the population follows a pattern of increasing and decreasing birth and death rates. So there are stages to your DTM. The first is the pre-industrial stage. Then we have a transitional stage. Some analysts believe that during the transitional stage, you could reach a demographic trap where population growth outstrips economic growth and life support systems, and you can get out of that transitional phase. There's the industrial and the post-industrial stage. Depending on what model you're looking at, some of them might have a fifth stage called the declining stage, because analysts now believe that some very developed countries are outgrowing stage 4. So here's a demographic transition model with only 4 stages. You'll notice here in the pre-industrial stage, we have high birth and death rates and a very low population. Because it's growing slowly, we don't have a lot of people surviving for a very long time, so our population stays low. During that transitional stage, you have your population growing rapidly. Birth rate is staying high, but death rate is decreasing because there's improved food production, improved sanitation, improved health, so your total population starts to go up. During the industrial stage, population growth slows a little bit because both in birth and death rates start to drop. Again, they're used to this idea that babies are actually surviving, so people aren't having as many children because they're not worried that they're all going to die. And now we have improved food production, more health care, better sanitation, education. And then post-industrial is where population growth levels off and then starts to decline as birth rates equal and then fall below death rates. So this is when we have the majority of women in the population in the workforce. They're having fewer children. So that's that post-industrial stage. Here's a demographic transition model with 5 stages. Everything is the same except this last 5th stage where we have a slow decrease. And you'll see that the 4th stage in this one, they're still saying that there's an increase. So it's a little bit different if you're looking at the different stages. We're going to focus more on a demographic transition model in class with the 5 stages instead of the 4. So there are 3 ways we can slow or stabilize population growth. 1, we can invest in family planning. 2, we can reduce poverty. And 3, we can elevate the social and economic status of women. So family planning provides educational and clinical services that helps couples choose how many children to have and when they want to have them. Programs vary, but the majority provide education, birth control, and health care, especially for pregnant women or infants. Studies have shown that these family planning services are responsible for a 55% drop in total fertility rates in developing countries. It's also shown a reduced number of legal or illegal abortions that happen in these same countries. However, there are 2 major problems still. 42% of all pregnancies in developing countries are still unplanned, and 26% of those end in abortion. An estimated 201 million couples in developing countries want to limit the number of children and determine spacing, but they lack access to family planning services. So therefore, some analysts are calling for expansion of this family planning program. They want it to include teenagers, and sexually active unmarried women and men, not just those that are married and in a couple at the moment. Empowering women can also slow population growth. Studies have shown that women have fewer children if they are educated, hold a paying job, live in societies where their human rights are not suppressed. Women do almost all of the world's domestic work and childcare, as well as 60 to 80% of the work associated with growing or gathering food. One of the quotes in your book says that for poor women, the only holiday is when they are asleep, because they're doing things to take care of their family and make sure they survive all day long. Globally, women account for 2/3 of all of the hours worked, but only 10% of the pay. So women generally, especially in developing countries, are severely underpaid or not paid at all. And again, in developing countries, girls are usually kept at home to work instead of being sent to school. So 900 million, and that's 3 times the population of the United States, 900 million women globally don't even attend elementary school. So there's this idea that they're trapped by illiteracy into poverty, into childcare. They can't kind of leave that role because they don't know anything outside of that role. So there's 2 case studies your book talks about. One of them is the one-child policy in China. And the one-child policy states that married couples in China who pledge to have no more than 1 child receive more food, larger pensions, better housing, free health care, salary bonuses, free school tuition for their child, and preferential employment opportunities. If they make this pledge and then have more than 1 child, all of this is taken away. China also provides free sterilization, contraceptives, and abortion. There were some issues for a little while because countries like the U.S. were hearing things about forced abortions. So the one-child policy got a really bad rap from countries like us because we were hearing about things like forced abortions. So other problems also include things like a gender imbalance. In China, there's a preference for males because women, when they're married off, they go to live with the family of the husband. So males stick around to take care of their family when they're older. There's parents when they're older. So there was a preference for males, which led to a gender imbalance. A lot of males and very few females because families would end up getting abortions if they found out that they were pregnant with a girl, and they would try again for the boy. China's fast-growing economy could face serious workforce and funding issues. So it's a huge population. Once this kind of one-child policy gets to where the adults of reproductive age currently are the elderly generation, they're gonna have a lot more elderly people than they are young, working-bodied, able people. So they're gonna have a lot higher demand to help with all of their economic things for that workforce, and they're not going to be there. There's also serious resource and environmental problems. India has also seen some issues. They have a major population problem. They're projected to reach about 1.67 billion people in 2050. So therefore population control is needed. India suffers extremely high rates of poverty. 1/4 of the people in India are considered poor. Only 18% of their people have access to adequate sanitation, and 80% are living on $2 a day or less. 40% of its population are considered malnourished, while half of its total child population is considered malnourished. Again, there's a preference for male children. They stick around to care for parents when they're elderly. And again, they're going to run into a lot of resource and environmental problems. So this is something that's not in your textbook, but it is an important part of population growth. This is an equation you will most definitely see on your AP test and for your exams in class. But doubling time is how many years it will take the population to double if it's growing at a certain rate. So doubling time in years is equal to 70 divided by the percent growth rate. So let's look at some practice problems. The first practice problem says, how many years will it take a population to double in size if the growth rate is 7%? So all we're going to do is plug things into the equation. So doubling time in years is equal to 70 divided by the percent growth rate, and in this case, in this problem, it was 7%. So 70 divided by 7 leaves us with a doubling time of 10 years. Another example says, what is the percent growth rate of if the doubling time is 35 years? So again, I plug things in. 35 years is my doubling time, and then 70 divided by the percent growth rate, which is what we're trying to find. So I need to kind of move around my equation a little bit. I'm going to multiply both sides by percent growth rate. It cancels it out on the right and moves it over to the left. So now we have percent growth rate times 35 years gives us 70. Again, I'm going to get rid of the 35 years on the left by dividing. So 70 divided by 35 means that my percent growth rate is 2%.